Hello BookTube, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is the What tag. So the What tag was created by Mark over at Book Time with Elvis. An original tag. Book Time with Elvis is a great new BookTube channel, just starting out, but he's already hit the ground running. I think putting most booktubers to shame by having two original tags out almost right out the gate. And he tagged me in this one, and this one was a lot of fun. And it was challenging, gave me some things to think about, and I'm finally getting around to being able to record. So without further ado, let's go through these very fun questions. The first one is, what is the oldest book that you own? For that, I'm going to take you on a little tour over there. So in my library, I keep my older, more antique books over on the top shelf. And the oldest books that I own are actually these over here. It's a set of 9. It's a complete set. It is in French, and these are from 1811. This is sort of like a summary history of the world that was originally written, I think, in 1799. And I'm not taking them down because they are very delicate. They'll start flaking off if I try moving them around. One of the things I like about them is that you can see the old paper that was actually used in the binding process. And again, it's in French. I can't really read it. And I have it next to Juliet by the Marquis de Sade, which I also can't read because it's in French. But yeah, that is those are the oldest books that I own, that 9-book collection. So the next prompt is, what is the most sentimentally valuable book you own? I mean, as far as sentimentality, this was difficult. I feel like earlier in life, I would be able to answer this quicker. I don't know if I'm quite as sentimental about physical books that I own. Maybe because I have a little bit more income now that I could replace things easier than I once could have. But I think one that I would choose to answer would be this copy here of Stephen King's Pet Sematary. This is the copy that I read back in, I think, 7th or 8th grade. It was the first adult horror novel that I read. I was always a monster kid. I was a horror fan. But this story already intrigued me, and I just remember being riveted by this. And this definitely set me, or helped nudge me along, which didn't require much on my path, my lifelong love of horror. But this is a copy that I've kept ever since then. I never managed to lose it, and I'm glad that I still have it to put on the shelf, even if I have some nicer copies. I don't see myself throwing this one out. So yeah, this one has some sentimental value for me. The next question is, what was the last book you gave someone as a gift? I don't give a lot of books as gifts. I don't want people to feel obligated to read something they don't want to read. I know the last one I definitely gave as a gift, and I'm not counting secondhand books that I've kind of given away to people. One that I actually bought to give as a gift, that would probably be a copy of Herodotus, of the Histories, to a friend, and that was a while ago. The next one, what book has given you a sleepless night? Now, I just held up a horror novel, but horror doesn't really scare me that much. Even when I was a kid, I was able to separate pretty quickly kind of fantasy from reality, and at a pretty early age, these things didn't really get to me. And even today, I'm a horror fan. I watch hundreds of horror films every year. Almost none of them scare me. I don't go to them to be scared. I kind of like the phantasmagoria. I like the creativity and the fantasy aspects that go into it. I like the kind of storytelling. I like the exploration of fears. I don't necessarily need to be incited by fear. So books don't generally give me sleepless nights. Probably the best answer that I could think about this would be what to expect when you're expecting. When I was a father-to-be, I'm sure there were many sleepless nights that I spent tossing and turning in bed after reading some of that book. Next one. What three literary characters would you most like to have to dinner and why? Um, so this is a fun one. Again, this was very difficult. Yeah, I've mentioned before on my channel that I mostly read nonfiction. And I've been getting more fiction in. So I don't know if I might be at more of a disadvantage a little bit with this. But this is what I came up with. My first guess would be Beowulf, arm wrestling champion of the Geats. Beowulf, because I know that he can entertain a mead hall. We can drink plenty of mead with him. He can regale us with stories and show us his physical feats. I think that he would be a good drinking partner. So Beowulf for drinking partner. Someone to help move things along. This is also kind of a sentimental copy that I'm going to show up because it's ugly. That's the only reason I keep it, is because there's sentimentality to it. And so I would pick Bilbo Baggins from The Hobbit, because even when a bunch of dwarves barge in uninvited, he still lays out the plates. He still tries to show them a good time. So I think that he would be a very respectful guest, and he'd also have some stories. He enjoys telling his own stories as well, and I'm sure he would help clean up afterwards. So Bilbo Baggins would be my next guest. And my last one, somebody's got to bring the food. And I thought, who better than the Ghost of Christmas Present? That huge bearded being. I wonder why I would admire that look. But with his kind of, almost like a cornucopia, and just food everywhere. So he can bring the food. Beowulf will help me eat it. Bilbo will help me prepare it and clean up. So those would be my three guests: Beowulf, Bilbo, and the Ghost of Christmas Present. Next, what book would you most like to live in for a year? As somebody who reads a lot of horror fiction, I didn't find many answers there, but there is another thing that I geek out about that I would like to live in. So that would be the Star Trek universe. This one is Federation, which actually deals with 3 timelines, that of Kirk, that of Picard, and also Zefram Cochrane, before the First Contact movie came out. So that Zefram Cochrane is a little bit different in this book. But I've always loved the Star Trek universe. I like there to be a little bit of an optimistic take about the future, exploration, going warp speed. I just love all that. Horror and Star Trek are kind of like my yin and yang. This is where I go to for the light and the hope after I make my forays into darkness. So I would love to spend a year in the Star Trek universe, going across the galaxy, visiting different worlds. Probably spend a month just on Ryza. But yeah, that's my answer. Next one. What deceased author would you like to have resurrected and why? This was another tough one to answer, but I settled on Ambrose Bierce. Here's his copy of the Devil's Dictionary here. Now, if you're not familiar with this has nothing to do with Satan or anything like that. This is a kind of a satirical dictionary, where he gives some often hilarious and invective definitions of common words in order to really poke fun at society at large. He also, though, Ambrose Bierce was a veteran of the Civil War. He wrote very vividly of the horrors of that war. He was essentially a horror writer in the late 19th century. He wrote An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, which ended up, I think it was like a French short film that ended up being a Twilight Zone episode. And he wrote a lot of short story collections, some that I'm going to try and read this year. And you got the Devil's Dictionary, which I'll just read a couple passages out of this thing. Like a guillotine. A machine which makes a Frenchman shrug his shoulders with good reason. Or you got history. An account mostly false of events mostly unimportant, which are brought about by rulers, mostly knaves, and soldiers, mostly fools. Idiot. A member of a large and powerful tribe whose influence in human affairs has always been dominant and controlling. The idiot's activity is not confined to any special field of thought or action, but pervades and regulates the whole. He has the last word in everything. His decision is unappealable. He sets the fashions of opinion and taste, dictates the limitations of speech, and circumscribes conduct with a deadline. And he follows out with ignoramus. That is, a person unacquainted with certain kinds of knowledge familiar to yourself, and having certain other kinds that you know nothing about. And I love this book. This is like the ultimate bathroom reader. If you're somebody who has a few minutes on a toilet, this is the perfect book to have next to it, and just start thumbing through. And the reason I would resurrect Bierce, though, especially, is because in 1913, he went down to Chihuahua, Mexico, in order to gain firsthand experience of the Mexican Revolution that was occurring. And he disappeared. We don't know what happened to him. He just was never heard from again. There was some sort of foul play, no doubt, but we do not know what happened to this guy. And he was just a genius and a brilliant writer, one who is unfortunately not nearly known as well, I think. But I would resurrect him and find out what the hell happened. And then I'd go invite him to dinner with Beowulf. So, Ambrose Bierce. Next prompt is, what book turned out to be the biggest surprise for you? So for that, I chose an old book. This is The Murder of Charles the Good by Galbert Bruges. This is an account. Sorry, I got the sun coming in my eyes now from the window. This is an account of the murder of Count Charles the Good, who was kneeling, praying at church, and some knights came in and just hacked him to death with swords. And there was this chaos that ensued afterwards, the perpetrators being hunted down and killed, and it was kind of chaos in Flanders. And this is in the year 1127. And Galbert wrote down what happened just very shortly after it all happened. I mean, he was a witness. He knew all about it. And what we end up getting is just some very compelling reading. It's terrific. It actually ends up being like a page turner. You don't expect this kind of book to come out of the Middle Ages in the first place. Something that actually feels very modern in a lot of ways when you read it. But it's so unique to the medieval writings that we have in the first place. And just as a modern reader, it was so much fun. So yeah, totally unexpected. So The Murder of Charles the Good is the biggest surprise for me, for my choice. Next prompt. What book that has already been published do you wish you had written? So one book that's always stuck with me, and I've always admired and just really respected the more and more I thought about it, and that's Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo. Written in, it was 1930s. See if I can actually verify that. 39. If you've seen the Metallica video for One, which uses film clips from Dalton Trumbo's own film adaptation of this, that had Donald Sutherland in it, then you know the basic story here. This is a World War I American soldier who has an explosive go off next to him, and he loses his legs, his arms, he loses his face, he has no eyes, he can't hear. The only sense that he really has is touch. And they're keeping him alive because they think that he's a vegetable. And they can kind of do experiments on, they can do tests on, not understanding that he's actually conscious beneath there. And this whole book is just like a stream of consciousness, like what's going on inside his mind, all from his point of view. And, you think about that concept and how do you go about achieving that? And he does it, and he gets inside his mind, and there's times where he thinks that rats are crawling all over him, and he can't tell if he's asleep or if he's awake, because he has no eyes. He doesn't know, and he's trying to communicate with a nurse, and she's trying to like kind of write letters on his skin to communicate. She realizes that he's sentient. He's actually conscious. This is just a nightmare world. I mean, really, it's kind of like a horror novel. I mean, this is a book that just completely stayed with me, and I totally admired it. And if I could ever, if I ever had a time machine and I pretended I wrote something, this would be something that, if I went back to 1930, or 1929, and said I had this amazing book that I just finished, this would probably be it. So yeah, Johnny Got His Gun. I think more people should really read this. One of the greatest anti-war novels ever. And the last prompt is what book has had the most influence or impact on your life so far? And this is one that I've brought up before on the channel briefly, but that would, I guess, be The Monster Show by David J. Schall, A Cultural History of Horror. And it's because this is the first work of looking at horror films in a historical cultural context, as historical texts, as artifacts, and looking at them within their historical context and interpreting them that way. This is my first exposure to that, and this ends up being, I know this is kind of a gateway drug for a lot of horror scholars, and yeah, it did its magic on me, and I loved it. And the reason why it's so influential is because it's something that I've stuck with. I still view horror films in that way. If I hadn't read this, I probably would not have begun my my horror review blog that I began after my son was born. That probably would not have led me to being on the HORRORCAST podcast. You can see a poster of that back there. My master's thesis was actually on horror films. It was looking at ghosts and hauntings in horror films in a cultural historical context. I'm still reading about it and writing about it. So I would say this had one of the most biggest influences or impacts in my life. And I still go back to this book. I still reference it. I still thumb through it. Is it my favorite work of horror scholarship? I mean, I don't even think it's my favorite, but it's among my favorites. But absolutely, this definitely set me on a certain path, fairly later in life, but one that is significant, one that I've really enjoyed. So yeah, my answer is The Monster Show. So I hope that I got all the questions and I didn't miss any. So that is the What tag. Again, created by Mark over at Book Time with Elvis. Okay, I'll leave his link below. And yeah, I'm not sure who to tag at this point. I'm really bad at this this aspect with tagging people. So I'm gonna tag Bill Ruttenberg over at the Ruttenberg Library, and I will also, I believe, I'm also gonna tag Peg over at the History Shelf. Get some of my history geeks involved in this, and I'd be really curious to see their answers. Okay, all right. Thanks, BookTube.